Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, flying solo. So this is, I guess, the draft edition / Chris Paul for Jordan Poole episode. I am recording this the day after everything went down because I wanted to see what played out the rest of the day. I mean, I was sitting there reading something, and then all of a sudden I got all these texts about Jordan Poole getting traded for Chris Paul, and honestly, my reaction was just to crack up. I was laughing a lot because this season has been, or it was, thankfully it's over, was so absurd that I just wanted something to happen. I've talked about this. Like, last season was such a slog as a fan, as somebody watching every game. You just knew that there was something going on. And for them to deny this chemistry issue, this punch issue, all this other stuff, and then eventually admit it, it's like, yeah, okay. And ever since the season ended, even before they admitted all this stuff, it was clear to me that you cannot run it back with the same guys. Right? You could not just assume that everybody goes on their, millionaire vacations and comes back and it's like, oh, we good. You know what I mean? That was not going to happen with Jordan Poole and Draymond Green or any of the other Warriors that, maybe Poole had some issues with during the playoffs, whether there was a rift with Steph, whether it was Steve Kerr just being down on him, whatever. It just wasn't going to happen. And even if there was a chance, maybe it could happen, why risk it, unless it was a sure thing. So the odds were like, hey, let's move on from this. And it was funny, right? Because Mike Dunleavy, I had said I wanted to see his first presser, which happened on Monday. And I was like, I want to see what kind of dude he is, how he talks to the media, what kind of things he says, and then what kind of moves he makes. And, he was fine during his presser. But the one thing he had said, which caught my ear and a lot of people's ears, was that Jordan Poole, we want to have him here for at least 4 years, whatever. I mean, what else is he going to say, right? At that point, there was already interest in Chris Paul. Who knows if they had offered Poole to Washington, but maybe they had. And maybe that caused Washington to be like, okay, we'll move Beal, we're going to get Poole, all this other stuff. So, that was the first thing I thought of when I heard about this trade going down. But first and foremost, I just got to say that I think that's a great move for Jordan Poole. I'd said, and just to rehash, I've been saying for, I don't know, like a month and a half now that, for him, as a player, as an individual, the dude just needs a fresh start, a clean slate, right? Because he's got his contract, right? That just kicks in next season. So he was only making $3 million or something plus with the Warriors. And then he starts making 24, 27, whatever it is, next year. So the Warriors have never been on the hook for that. And he has his contract. He has a championship ring, and now he gets to go to a team where he will legitimately start. I mean, the dude is going to jack up like 30 shots a night. You know what I mean? And yeah, we'll see what kind of player he really, really is, right? Over the years, the comps have been CJ McCollum. Maybe he could be like Jordan Clarkson or Jamal Murray. You know what I mean? So we'll see. I mean, they're going to be bad, but that's their intention. And Poole gets away from Draymond Green. I mean, all that stuff, just to touch on it again, it's like he had this whole experience of, Draymond talking about this punch and acting like he's the victim, right? And Poole doesn't seem like the kind of dude who'll just, forgive and forget. Like, he just kind of closed off. And we saw this in clips, in moments where he would ignore Draymond during the playoffs and Steph would have to talk to him and all this other jazz. And, all that enabling of Draymond, I don't want to get into right now. because I've talked about that so much in the past, but he gets away from this specter, this cloud of Draymond Green. And he also gets away from Klay Thompson blocking his path to a starting job. You know what I mean? Like, so he has his money, he has his ring, and now he has more or less his own team. Remains to be seen if he becomes the guy on that team, but he'll get every opportunity to find out because his contract, it's not huge. I mean, it's a decent contract, of course, but it's not going to handicap a team from doing anything with him. He'll earn that contract, in my opinion, right? But now they have 4 years to see if he belongs on the Wizards for beyond that, right? And even in a couple years, they can move him because that contract is going to be movable no matter what. But, congrats to Jordan Poole. I got to say, I'm glad he's gone because even though there were times during this past season, like I defend him in this whole thing with Draymond because I just, that still kind of sticks in my craw that Draymond did that, and that subsequently he made a documentary. He goes on with Stephen A. Smith and acts like it was something that happened to him, and him talking to Steve Kerr, all that jazz. That stuff is honestly a little bit like annoying, a little irritating in a lot of ways. But when we're looking at Jordan Poole, I talked all season long about how aggravating his game was. Didn't play defense, was never held accountable to play defense by Steve Kerr, by Draymond, by anyone else. Maybe Draymond couldn't say anything to him, but Steph couldn't get him to play defense. He dribbled off his face, off his leg, off his chest, off his foot, off his ankle. He would fall down all the time. And yeah, we saw glimpses of when he's under control, when he can pass the ball and whatnot and find other guys and get them going. Jordan Poole could do those things. We could see glimpses where it's like, oh, maybe in the future, maybe he takes that next step, makes a leap next year. But the playoffs might have been just the last straw, at least from a player perspective. The Jordan Poole that we saw last season, last playoffs versus the Nuggets versus the Grizzlies, etc., we didn't get that. And whether it was also him kind of pouting if Steph was, in game 6 after losing game 6 at home, getting blown out by the Kings, if he made that speech and it was directed at Poole, maybe Kuminga, if Kerr was just down on him completely, then, the writing was on the wall, even more so, right? So not just the chemistry stuff, but also just the really, really just on the court stuff. And then you look at the salary stuff, right? With the new CBA kicking in mostly next season, then, this 4-year deal that the Warriors signed Poole to at the beginning of the season in the preseason, that was going to hurt them, right? It was going to hurt them just in terms of the length of it and how much money it was. I will say that, I thought signing Poole to a deal made sense at the time, and it did because he just gotten punched. He was improving, right? And what Tyler Hero had signed a deal that was similar. So that kind of set the bar, set the range for him, and you had him under control, right? You have him as an asset. And honestly, like at 24 million or whatever it is per year for 4 years, it wasn't going to be a deal that was hard to move. We didn't know that Poole would have such an up and down rough season, right? This was obviously after he'd gotten slugged by Draymond, but still the contract was not terrible, right? Like people can look at Poole and be like, okay, there's talent there. They can look at him playing the Nuggets and him having that March of 2022 where he, scored a bunch of threes and played really well, all that other stuff, and say, we'll take a flyer on him, right? I always said it was going to be a rebuilding team, and the Wizards they were a bad team, and now they are officially a rebuilding team. So I'm glad Poole is gone. Again, not to harp on him or just to, talk too negatively, but like I got tired of his game. I got tired of the fact that no one held him accountable. I got tired of the fact that no one got him to play defense, that he wouldn't do it on his own, that he would make poor decisions, that he would take heat check threes from just inside mid court. Right. I was done with that. And honestly, Steph dancing, I'm used to that. He's earned that and whatever. Poole, all the celebrations, those were all fine until it was like he would get smoked on defense and then come down, hit a heat check three and dance and prance. And I was like, dude, come on, like do this, play hard at both ends of the court, right? When the team is not doing well, there's no chance. You should not be dancing and prancing like that as if you are the second coming. And, I think that for him, clean slate. Goodbye. Congratulations. I don't dislike, obviously, Jordan Poole, but I think at least this is the action and the clean break that I was hoping for from the season that just ended. So when it comes to Chris Paul, I was personally surprised, right? I had thought that the move was going to be a combination, a package of Poole, Kuminga, picks, Patrick Baldwin Jr., Moses Moody, whatever, any other assets, Rollins, to get somebody else. But we know that with Chris Paul, that his contract has 2 years. The second year is not guaranteed. So the Warriors can let him go, can get rid of him and get some tax relief, get under the second apron or whatever, and start planning out that way for the future. And that's why, some of these teams aren't getting much in return for some of these dudes. It's like teams are trying to angle for next season. And, on the court, people say that Chris Paul is a pick and roll guy, and he 100% is. And as soon as we traded for him, I was like, oh man, I wish James Wiseman was still here. I wish we could trade GP2 for James Wiseman. So when you look at this calculus, and it's like, oh, will he fit in? Will Chris Paul fit in? I mean, think about it. There were times during the season, Steph talked about this, where, Jordan Poole played Steph's role, played Clay's role so well in the Warriors offense that it was a little too predictable. There were no other looks that the Warriors could give to teams with second units, right? In the past, they had Sean Livingston, Maurice Spates, David West. They could play a little bit differently when Steph was out, like not a fully Steph-centric offense when he'd be getting rest on the bench. And with Chris Paul, you'll definitely get that. He's not going to play a huge ton of minutes. Of course, he's going to be 38, 39 in the playoffs if the Warriors get there next season. But with him, he can pick and choose his spots. You'll definitely see Clay sit nights. You'll see Steph sit nights. And let's face it, dudes are going to get injured. Steph gets injured. Chris Paul gets injured. Hopefully Clay doesn't get injured again. So there's going to be places where he needs to play more minutes. There's going to be times where Chris Paul starts. I mean, I'm assuming he's cool with coming off the bench because somebody's got to come off the bench, right? You're not going to roll out Steph and Chris Paul and Clay and Wiggins. I mean, unless you go small and have Draymond play center and get him beat up all season long. I don't see that happening, right? So you're going to roll out the usual starting five and have CP3 come off the bench as a sixth man for the first time in his career, probably in his life, before the NBA. So to me, him coming in, being able to control the game, show another team different looks, and hit that mid-ranger, right? Hit that elbow jumper, the one that David West used to be able to hit. The ones that Sean Livingston usually shot a little bit closer, in the post turnarounds, but still he could hit that. And it's more guaranteed than Jordan Poole. And it's the decision-making, right? This is a play for going all in, win now, next season, and also to lighten the load salary cap wise. That's it. This is not about like, okay, planning for the future. Because also, I mean, Ryan Rollins was in this deal. And for what little I saw of Rollins and highlights and whatever, and just seeing, I mean, the kid has a good feel for the game, but he was the obvious one that was going to get jettisoned when you looked at this bench and it's like, oh, which young guys are you gonna offload, right? He was obviously the one that clearly was not going to stick around. But at the end of the day, cool. We'll see how this CP3 thing plays out. Obviously, this is not just Dunleavy's move. And I will say, good on Dunleavy for making something happen. That's what we want to see. Like, I want to see some action. Basically, I don't want to see anyone play safe or stand pat. But this is also Steph, Draymond, Steve Kerr. So everyone who loved Jordan Poole and all the dancing and all the heat check shots that personally, like I said earlier, I'm kind of over. I was over that stuff at the beginning of the season. The ones who were lamenting Mike Dunleavy and this move and putting it on him. No, all the blame, all the credit should not go to Mike Dunleavy. This is Steph. This is Draymond. This is Steve Kerr, right? I'm not saying Steph was like, go get me Chris Paul, but he was certainly, I mean, Dunleavy said it himself, that he's in contact with Steph. And this is what he wants. This is what he wants. So if this fails, then hey, this is we always talk about, we mock the Lakers and LeBron being the GM. And I don't think this is to that extent for Steph and Draymond, but even though Draymond's a free agent, he definitely has input in this, or at least his feelings are probably known, especially in terms of him wanting to come back and signing, but this is part of, these guys looking at their final few years together and saying, this is what we want. They're flexing. I mean, the Wiseman trade was largely to free up money to make sure that Draymond would have a better chance of coming back. You know what I mean? Yes, there's on-court stuff too. And I've talked about this ad nauseum, how Wiseman didn't get a fair shake, but it was like, hey, Wiseman's contract is going to be really, really rough to get around if you want to keep Draymond in the following couple of seasons. So Steph is flexing, more than he ever had before. And this is part of it. So just remember that. And if it works out, and I hope it does, I mean, it could, if they stay healthy and if they find a big somewhere, then it could definitely work out. And I will applaud the move if it works out. But again, just to reiterate, this is not just Dunleavy, plain and simple. But yeah, getting rid of Rollins, they're righting the wrongs of some of these kind of going in on the youth. And everybody talks about the 2 timelines and 2 timelines is over, blah, blah, blah. People started talking about 2 timelines around the 2021 draft when the Warriors drafted Kuminga and Moody. But guess what? They picked up some vets, and those cheap vets, Bjelica, Gary Payton II, even though Steph and Draymond wanted Avery Bradley instead. And then also Otto Porter Jr. Those all hit, right? And then the 2 timelines worked. But the problem was, again, in hindsight, I will say that I was, all for using some of these draft picks. And I thought that the 3 lotto guys would be more ready, and that, the punch, obviously that changed a lot of things, but they went too far in with the youth, right? They went in like with Rollins and Patrick Baldwin Jr. So the Warriors are righting those wrongs. What I don't want is for them to go automatically reactionary, like too young, let's go all the way old. And by picking up Chris Paul, they certainly got much older, much smaller, much more injury prone. That's why I hope right now, as of today, as of Friday, June 23rd, the Warriors have not traded Moses Moody. They have not traded Jonathan Kuminga. If the Warriors can get out of this offseason keeping those guys, especially Kuminga to me, then I'm okay. Let's see what happens. You know, the Warriors in the draft, they picked up that dude, Brandin. I forgot his name. I'm sorry. Let me look it up here. Brandin Podziemski. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I'll get it right eventually. And then they also picked up the dude from Indiana in a trade for, well, basically like they included Patrick Baldwin Jr. in the Chris Paul trade, and they got the 57th pick, and they took Trayce Jackson-Davis, a senior who averaged 20 and 10 out of Indiana, and he's 6'8", 6'9", kind of Draymond-ish. And I actually like this one. I'm bummed. I really liked Patrick Baldwin Jr. I thought that he, next season could give the Warriors something as this stretch big. But the fact of the matter is, you look at Patrick Baldwin Jr. and he didn't play a full senior year in high school because of an ankle injury. He didn't play a full freshman year because of that same ankle injury his freshman year in college. And he didn't play much last year because Steve Kerr wouldn't play him, and et cetera, whatever, development year. So he just doesn't have enough experience. He doesn't have enough rep. He's still technically a project. And that's not all on Patrick Baldwin Jr. Like I said, a lot of that is on happenstance with injuries and also, the Warriors organization and failure to develop him. But with this Trayce Jackson-Davis guy, who's Dale Davis's kid, the kid knows how to play. He doesn't shoot it great from outside, but that's what Patrick Baldwin Jr., that was his main strength. But he looks like he knows how to pass. He knows how to play. He could potentially fit in nicely in this Warriors motion offense for now. Like I'm hoping he's maybe like one of those guys, like the guys they have on OKC who are just big and athletic and just know how to play. That's what I'm hoping for him. I was pretty upset that they traded Patrick Baldwin Jr. because I was fine with losing Poole. I was fine with losing Rollins. But I was like, oh man, the two young dudes I wanted them to keep were Jonathan Kuminga and Patrick Baldwin Jr. I'm fine with even trading Moses Moody, but the way it stands is, the Warriors used those picks. They used their number 19 pick, and they swapped out PBJ for TJD, I guess we're going to refer to him as from now on. Also, the fact of the matter is, too, it's like it's a win now move and it's a salary move. PBJ was still a first round pick, and he's more expensive than a rookie 57th overall pick. Although they did give TJD, that just sounds weird. I'm not going to say that right now. They did give Jackson Davis a 3-year deal, I believe, which is what they did with Ryan Rollins in last year's draft. But obviously he's gone as well. So will either of these rookies play? Who knows? Who knows? I mean, I feel like that pressure to play them, Dunleavy talked about like he doesn't expect it. He's kind of softening that load. And I actually expect Jackson-Davis to play more just because he's a senior. He's kind of like Draymond, right? Played 4 years at a Big Ten school and has these skills, not a great shooter from the outside, but has these skills, and at least he has more athleticism. So I can see him getting in there, maybe as a center, right? Especially in like garbage minutes. So we'll see. If it means there's no more Anthony Lamb out there taking up those minutes, I'm good with that. But I will be bummed for a while that we lost Patrick Baldwin Jr. because I liked what he could have brought. But again, you just look at it and it's like, okay, they're trying to stack the deck somehow, some way for next season. Can they do it? Can they? Real quick, back to Chris Paul and Jordan Poole. It's funny, right? Because I think Steve Kerr included Jordan Poole in his foundational six, right? For the Warriors, it's Draymond, Wiggins, Steph, Clay, Looney, and then Jordan Poole. But at the end of the day, that was before the punch, and Draymond literally just punched him out of the foundational six. So I find that terribly unfortunate. Also, again, before the Warriors title run last season, towards the end of the season, I was like thinking that maybe eventually the Warriors are going to move Wiggins or Poole or Moody, who of course was a rookie at the time. But Wiggins and Poole both showed out in the postseason. Wiggins became super critical. Poole, he had his moments, but he also, it was a matchup thing for him. He didn't look great against other teams that targeted him on defense and whatnot. And also, he's just not a two-way player. Wiggins is. The thing about Poole is like he had such a small sample size. That was the risk about giving him this contract, the small sample size of consistency. And the fact that he had a full year of him with the punch, regardless of that he couldn't just and I know it was tough going back from the bench and starting whatever, but that he could never put together a solid stretch of consistent play and, take that leap, make that leap to the next level. So, it became him. With Chris Paul, again, I talked about the change of pace. And let's be honest, the Warriors have trouble getting to the foul line. And I've always talked about how much I hate Chris Paul's game baiting for fouls, right? Him, Trae Young, James Harden, can't stand that type of game. But guess what? He's on our team now, so there's a benefit. I mean, it's going to be weird to watch that, and whatever. I'll get used to it because you just do. But yeah, it's going to be funny. And also, I've talked about Chris Paul, right? The basketball gods, for all of Chris Paul's flopping and arguing and cantankerous demeanor and all this stuff. I was like, okay, the basketball gods will never reward Chris Paul. The karma will never go in his way so that he'll win a title. That's what's going to happen. But here he is. And now I have to root for Chris Paul to win a title. What? That's a strange feeling. And Chris Paul seems like a good enough dude, fine enough dude off the court, right? I guess he's a great guy, but on the court, it's going to be really, really, really strange. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited just because there's some change taking place. I could not have survived next season watching the same team if they returned the same top 8 or 9 guys. Plain and simple. Minus DiVincenzo, because he'll most likely sign somewhere else, and the Warriors are already too small at this point. Yeah. But it's a risk because if, Steph, Clay, Draymond, Chris Paul, if a couple of those guys get injured for a significant amount of time, then it might be over. Who knows? And then also we'll see what other kind of moves, right? I don't know which big man the Warriors are targeting. I don't know if they're going to try to just sign somebody on the fringes, which is actually what I assume. I don't think you're going to trade Kuminga, Moody, assets, future picks for anyone in particular. I honestly, I'm not exactly sure who's out there that is attractive to them at this point. It might just be somebody who can eat up minutes during the regular season and then play spot minutes in the playoffs, right? Matchups. But I don't know, people are talking about JaVale McGee. I haven't watched JaVale McGee in a long time. I know that he hasn't played in a while. And does he have enough? I don't know. Maybe. Is there somebody else? Who knows? But the Warriors definitely need to get bigger. And again, as of now, the Warriors have not traded Jonathan Kuminga. But they've moved their picks from last season, Baldwin and Rollins. But they also picked up another couple of young dudes. So this youth movement thing, it may not be the classic 2 timeline thing, right? But they still have some young guys on there. They need to free up some roster spots to get some more veteran help, plain and simple. If we can escape this offseason with Kuminga intact, I'll be good. I'll be good. And, just again, touching on the 2 timeline thing, it worked until it went extreme, but just don't obliterate it for one stretch run. It might be that, Lacob and Dunleavy are like, okay, we're going to give you what you want and we're going to go for this. But then if it doesn't work out, see what happens with Clay, see what happens with Chris Paul, and maybe free some things up. Who knows? Maybe you sign Clay for for less per year, but a few more years than you probably would want to otherwise. Same thing probably with Draymond this offseason. Or maybe the writing's on the wall and Clay moves on. Same thing with CP3. Maybe it's just like, okay, that didn't work. Maybe he gets injured in December and never comes back. That's where all this stuff lies. It was a wild day, and I'm looking forward to more. I just want to see more, because it, as much as after the title last year, I was like, all right, let's get some internal development here. Let's find some cheap vets. Let's just run it back, and the Warriors will be better. The young guys will be better, and the vets are still going to be in their mid to late primes, etc. That was then. This was like, we don't want to watch what we just saw. You know what I mean? I can't do that. And 100% by getting rid of Poole and bringing in Chris Paul, you will not be seeing what we just saw. So again, fingers crossed, we keep Kuminga, but we'll see. I don't even know, this idea of that people had of getting Siakam. I don't even know if they can get him anymore because they don't have Poole. They have fewer assets, right? I don't think they're going to offload all their picks, right? The Warriors gave the Wizards they're a top 20 protected 2030 pick. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. It is what it is, right? They gave up a second round or two. I forgot what year, but it is what it is. I would have liked, my buddy Aaron Matrono was like, hey, I would have liked to have gotten Daniel Gafford, the center from Washington, but that obviously didn't happen either in that deal. But we'll see. All these moves are about win now and shed as much or create as much flexibility beyond this season. So I think with Moody and Kuminga, we'll see how they approach it. And fascinating stuff. Thanks, Mike Dunleavy, for making this season or this week interesting so far. All right, that's all I got.